I still remember the first time I drove through the valley and saw that land. Golden fields rolling across the hills, the sun dipping behind the pines, and nothing but quiet, country air. It was the kind of place that made you forget about email notifications and HOA newsletters. It felt like freedom. I bought that land 17 years ago, all 213 acres of it. Back then, it was dry brush and overgrown trails, but I saw the bones of something beautiful. Over the years, I turned it into a working vineyard. We planted Merlot, Syrah, and Zinfandel, built a small tasting room, a cold cellar, and a private home on the edge of the ridge. My wife called it our valley, and she was right. What most people didn't realize, though, was that the vineyard sat adjacent to a new suburban development that came years later. McMansions with solar panels and 4-car garages started popping up just a half-mile from my gate. They had their own homeowners association, complete with bylaws and petty little rules. But my land, my vineyard, wasn't part of that, and that's where the trouble started. It began small, a letter in my mailbox from the HOA. Your property is not in compliance with community landscaping standards. I laughed at first. I don't live in your community, I thought. I own the entire hillside above your community. But the letters kept coming. Then came the woman. Her name was Glenda, HOA president. Blonde helmet hair, sunglasses that never came off, and a clipboard fused to her hand like a prosthetic. She marched up to my gate one morning and started snapping pictures. I was pruning the Syrah vines near the edge of the road when I heard her. She didn't even greet me, just shouted, "Sir, this fencing is an eyesore and a safety risk." I calmly replied, "Ma'am, this is private agricultural land. You're not even supposed to be standing there." She ignored me and kept snapping photos like she was auditioning for CSI, Suburbia. That same afternoon, I found a printed notice duct taped to my tasting room door. It claimed I was in violation of local visual codes, whatever that means, and demanded I repaint my barn to match the HOA-approved palette. I knew it then. Glenda and her HOA army were just getting started. Now, my vineyard has its own private access road, a dirt path winding past the edge of the new development. It's mine, legally, and always has been. But over the past few months, the HOA had decided it was unsightly, claiming it diminished property values. A few of the newer residents even started parking their Range Rovers in front of it, trying to block my delivery trucks. When I confronted one of them, a guy in pastel shorts and loafers without socks, he smirked and said, "Well, maybe if you joined the HOA we could work something out." That's when I realized this wasn't just confusion. This was a full-blown turf war. 1 week later, things escalated. It was harvest season, and we had early workers coming in around 5 a.m. to start picking grapes before the heat kicked in. At 6:12 a.m. sharp, while I was pouring coffee in the tasting room to Sheriff Patrol, SUVs rolled up my access road. Lights on, no sirens. I stepped outside, and they were already unbuckling their belts like they were ready for trouble. "Sir," one of them said, "we received a call from the Heritage Ridge HOA, reports of illegal construction, zoning violations, and potential environmental damage." I blinked. What? The younger deputy squinted at his iPad. "They said you've been diverting water illegally, and your structure," he motioned to the cellar, "violates some sort of ridgeline sightline code." I laughed. I actually laughed. "Officer, I think someone's confused about jurisdiction." That's when I handed them the deed, and everything changed. The deputy took the leather-bound folder from my hands, flipping it open with cautious eyes. The older one, clearly the ranking officer, stepped in to read over his shoulder. They both scanned the document, and I could see their posture shift. "Is this ... all yours?" the younger one asked. "Every acre," I replied. "See that ridge over there?" I pointed east, where the hills curved upward like a natural barrier. "That's my property line. Everything west of that, down to the creek. All mine, including this road, this vineyard, and that old barn that apparently offends someone's sense of aesthetics." The older officer whistled softly. "You're not in their HOA," I raised an eyebrow. "I'm not even in their zip code." They exchanged a look. The younger one tapped his iPad, scrolling through maps. "They said you were building a garage without permits." "That's a wine cellar," I said. "Inspected, approved, and taxed by the county 6 years ago. I can forward you the records." They stepped back. One of them radioed something and I heard static and then a female dispatcher say, "Confirmed, property owner is outside HOA jurisdiction." I watched as their expressions turned sheepish. "Sorry, sir," the older deputy said. "Looks like we were misinformed." "Misinformed," I repeated, locking eyes with them, "or manipulated." Because Glenda wasn't just being annoying anymore. She was weaponizing local law enforcement. wasting taxpayer resources to bully a man who refused to join her little suburban fief. But that wasn't the end of it. It was only the beginning. A few days after the police visit, I got a notice from the county. A formal complaint had been filed against my agricultural tax status, claiming my vineyard wasn't an active farm. It accused me of operating a winery for private consumption under false pretenses. It was laughable. I had shipping records, income statements, and a website with photos of vineyard tours. But the fact that someone went to this length filing paperwork with the county told me just how far Glenda was willing to go. I decided to pay a visit. Wearing jeans, boots, and a clean vineyard polo, I walked into the Heritage Ridge HOA office, a converted bedroom at the back of the clubhouse, and found Glenda behind a faux mahogany desk. She looked up, startled. "Mr. Hargrave," she said, blinking. "That's right," I said. "The guy whose vineyard you tried to get shut down." She smiled thinly. "We're just trying to keep the neighborhood in good standing." "You mean the neighborhood that doesn't include my land?" She didn't respond. I leaned in. "You've filed false reports, trespassed on private land, harassed my workers. This isn't just petty anymore. It's criminal." She tried to wave it off. "There's been a misunderstanding." "Oh, I agree, but it's not on my part." I walked out without raising my voice, but the storm had already begun. And the revenge? Oh, it was coming. 2 weeks later, Glenda and her HOA weren't prepared for what showed up on their doorstep. I'd filed a formal complaint with the county board backed by notarized documents, drone footage of her trespassing onto my property, and a log of police reports proving false claims. But I wasn't stopping there. You see, there's a funny thing about HOAs. They think they're untouchable, little kings and queens of cul-de-sacs, but legally, they're just private corporations. And in the state of California, making false reports to law enforcement, misusing government resources, and interfering with agricultural operations is not only a violation, it's a felony if proven to be part of a coordinated effort. I called a friend, an environmental lawyer who owed me a favor after I helped him with a vineyard tour for his wedding anniversary. He took one look at the case and smiled. "Let's make it loud," he said. By the end of the week, Glenda and her HOA received a cease and desist order, served in person during a community wine tasting event that she herself had organized in the clubhouse garden. Oh, and the wine they were serving, from my vineyard. She was holding a glass of Mycera when the deputy walked up to her with a folder. The silence was deafening. People stared. Someone actually gasped. She turned crimson, stumbling over her words, trying to hand the glass off to someone else. But the deputy just stood there, calm and firm, and read the words out loud. "You are hereby ordered to cease all actions interfering with the private agricultural business located at Hargrave Valley Estates." It felt like poetic justice. But we weren't done yet. Over the next 10 days, I launched something I'd been planning quietly for years. The Hargrave Valley Wine and Harvest Festival, a full weekend event, open to the public, with tastings, tours, live music, and artisan booths. And I sent personal invites to everyone in Heritage Ridge. Every single house. I even offered a 50% discount to HOA members. You should have seen their faces. Cars lined up outside the development. A team of parking attendants, all legally contracted, guided them to a makeshift gravel lot on my land. There were buses running from the highway, helicopters bringing in wine bloggers. The entire valley buzzed with laughter, clinking glasses, and the smell of wood-fired pizza and lavender oil. Guess who wasn't invited? Glenda. Oh, she came, of course, but not as a guest. She marched up to the front gate with her clipboard, again, and barked at my staff about illegal event noise and violation of local codes. One of my assistants, a local college student named Maddie, just smiled and handed her a copy of the permit. Fully stamped, fully approved. "You're welcome to join the tour," Maddie said sweetly, "but no outside complaints allowed past this point." Glenda's jaw clenched. She turned and stormed off down the hill. Meanwhile, inside the vineyard, I was toasting a group of guests from the HOA. "We had no idea you owned everything past the ridge. They always made it sound like you were just some stubborn old guy with a barn." The fallout came fast. Once the county got involved and reviewed the reports Glenda had submitted, they launched an investigation into misuse of public services. Turns out she hadn't just called the police on me, she'd submitted 6 separate complaints, all using her HOA title and the association's letterhead. That alone made it a corporate matter. The county issued a fine, and how did the HOA respond? They turned on her. At the next HOA board meeting I attended quietly from the back row, sipping lemon water in a blue button-down, Glenda was voted out as president. It wasn't even close. One of the board members, a retired Marine named Carl, stood up and said, "We moved here for peace and quiet, not to start petty wars with someone who owns more land than our entire community combined." The room clapped. Glenda stood there, blinking like she didn't know what had hit her. I almost felt bad, but my final move, that came a few days later. I'd been negotiating with a boutique hotel chain for months, talks that had started before the HOA drama even began. They wanted to lease a portion of my lower Vineyard Ridge for a luxury inn and spa, complete with 10 private cottages, a wine-pairing restaurant, and a yoga barn. The deal went through, and the new planned entrance, right off the road that curves through the backside of Heritage Ridge. I didn't need HOA approval. I didn't need community input. The land was zoned agricultural tourism. The county was already thrilled about the job creation and tax income. But what it meant for Heritage Ridge: more traffic, more tourists, more exposure to everything they'd tried to block out. And the best part, I offered first priority hiring to anyone living in the HOA. The ones who had glared at me in silence now sent emails asking for interviews. Some even offered to volunteer at the harvest next season. I wasn't trying to be cruel. I was just proving a point. When you pick a fight with someone because you think they're small, you'd better make sure they don't own the whole chessboard. Months later, things had settled down. The festival had become a seasonal event, drawing in thousands of guests from around the state. My wines were winning awards. My staff had grown. And the hotel already had reservations booked solid through next summer. But the best moment came in early spring, when I got a handwritten letter in the mail. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting. It was from Glenda. "Mr. Hargrave," it began. "I've taken time to reflect on the past year. I now see that I overstepped boundaries, both literal and social. I'm no longer on the HOA board. I've started volunteering at the county fair and learning more about agriculture. I apologize for the inconvenience I caused. It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was something." My wife read it over my shoulder and chuckled. "Thinks she wants a job," I smiled. "Maybe just a glass of wine." And that's the real irony, isn't it? All she ever had to do was knock on the gate and ask. I'd have given her a tour, offered a bottle, explained the work, the sweat, the years that went into this land. Instead, she tried to own the world with bylaws and bullet points. And when she realized who she was really dealing with, she had no choice but to surrender. In the end, I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to threaten. All I had to do was show them the view from the ridge. The one that stretches for miles, where the valley bends to the sun and the grapes grow sweet from the soil. Because when you own the valley, you don't argue with the HOA, you let them come to you.